Today's topic, Acustica Audio Black. This may be, at least for me, the most intriguing plugin release of the last several years, maybe since even like RC20. And at this point, I have no idea how long ago that was released. So in this video, we're going to quickly take a look and a listen to it, talk about it, and then compare it to a couple other plugins that I have in my collection. So let's get into it. Before we go into our comparison and do a little bit of a sonic test, let's just walk through the plugin. There's like 4 different versions. You'll have the Black Standard, Black Guru, and then there's also 0 latency versions of each of those. Depending on your needs, your computing resources, you could try the 0 latency, see what you think. For my purposes here and for how I would use this plugin, I don't think I'd really have to use that one. But a lot of instances will end up adding a lot of latency to your project. May be a big deal, may not be. That's besides the point. So what you have is an input stage. And in the Guru version, you have this nice meter so you can kind of see where you're going and how hard you're driving in to the optional preamp that you're going to set. There's also a low pass and a high pass filter. And these are the sorts of filters that you're just going to set and forget, because if you go fast on them, you wouldn't want to automate it. You're going to hear indexing or clicking because all Acustica audio stuff is like sampled. So let's just listen to these filters. They do sound nice. If I go any faster than that, you hear a little bit of that clicking. High pass filter. The other nice feature to this plugin is that you have these like 8 universal presets that you can set. So if we were to close this thing down and bring in a new instance, we could very easily flick through the presets, and all you have to do is hit that button to save. And so what I could do here is I could load up my mic pre's here, 1 to 8. This is the demo version. This is the only bank you have, but it would be good enough for listening and making a comparison. And then if I was to go in here and save this, let's say I go to slot number 7, which as you could then see, it took that away. We'll go back to number 2, and there we have that brought back up, and we have our 8 different channels we could use. Just so it's more obvious, I'm gonna go in here and actually choose empty here, so that goes out. I'll save that on number 7. So now we'll go back to number 2. You can see our bank loads up, 7, empty, ready to go. There's an auto gain feature, haven't used it. I assume it tries to put you into the optimal to hot range based on listening to the signal. I don't really know. Doesn't really matter to me because it's pretty easy to just change this around to get what I want. So we now have our preamp turned on and we have our input stage. And we're actually running maybe slightly hot. And we'll add a little bit of this high pass filter just in case there's subsonics. And that's really all this plugin is. So on its own, just kind of in standard mode, it's not going to seem that exciting or that interesting. We could really drive this in super hot if we wanted to, but I'm not going to do that at this stage or at this point. You can experiment with that on your own. Where this becomes very powerful and unique is the fact that if I was working on a project with, let's just say, 16 tracks, very quickly and easily I could load up these 16 instances using those presets, and I could just flick through these various channels and get myself set up and good to go to emulate more of a console type system. And that's what we're going to be doing, and then we're going to compare how this sounds to some other popular ones that are out there. All right, let's keep going. For our first comparison, we'll be listening to Cream, and I actually got this for free because I have a Focusrite interface, and I thought, okay, cool, let's see how far Acustica Audio has come since I've worked with it before. I'm a fan of Nebula. I'm a fan of their products for the way that they sound, but the user interface is at times so clunky. I just can't work with this stuff because it just takes too long, or it's too counterintuitive, or knobs and things aren't working the way they should. And this is just to give you an example here, and there's a lot going on. We have a preamp stage where I have option to choose tube, mic, line. Let's say I go to line, I get that set up. Now I'm going through and I'm picking the channel. But even something like this, as you can see, like sometimes it lands on a number, sometimes it goes in between. There's just like small details and things like this that drive me crazy. We then here have a little magic knob, but if you were to turn this, it's not going to do anything. So we have to choose a setting here, and you can see there's all of these cool different EQ modes and things like that, but just making these changes and doing this is honestly kind of tricky. It's just not that easy or intuitive or straightforward. The same thing is going to be true when you go to these other bass, presence, and treble options and trying to set yourself or go to these different frequency ranges. You know, it's tough. It's something that I wish was just easier to work with. So I just wanted to say that at the beginning, because that's one of the reasons why I find Black so intriguing, is the fact that like it is so easy to work with compared to some of their other stuff. All of their stuff sounds amazing. It's just so hard to work with at times, and it takes a long time. So in this first example here, we've applied cream everywhere. That just sounds so sounds so dirty, but we have. So here we have like the EQ that I've applied, and this took forever to set up. We've also used the compressor on the drums channel, but part of the reason was so I could use the specific compressor preamp. And then on all of the other channels, we have preamps set, and we have different line settings. And on the master, I believe we have set up, let me just turn this off real quick. We have set up here the tube, and this one actually sounds really nice. The tube Model 1 sounds really good. But all that being said, here is the little piece we're going to be listening to. Turn the volume down. So worth stating up front that what we're looking at here is like a finishing process. So trying to add in just a little bit extra, a little bit of sparkle and sheen on top. If you have a crappy track, like what we have here in this 8-bar loop that I made in 5 minutes, if you have something bad like this, all of this processing just doesn't matter at all. You still have to have a good track, and that is very important. So don't get super caught up on these specialty finisher processors. I know we're doing it in this video, but your track has to be good for any of this to matter. Now let's go ahead and add in all of these instances. We got that nice, lovely click sound, and all of the latency's been brought back in. And now let's go ahead and listen to it. That's with everything off. And that's with everything on. A couple more times. Off. And all of them back in. Okay, so that's making a significant difference also because of the EQ that's been brought on and the compression on the drums, but there's still a big chunk of that where that enhancement is because of those preamps and having them all working together. Now we'll do a fair volume comparison. Okay, so I've attempted to match the loudness by going into the Pro L2 and then, matching the integrated LUFS. I have had to drive in the version with Cream harder. And with these double entendres, but by doing that, I'm a little bit worried that we have shifted the tonality maybe a little bit, but sometimes you just can't get things absolutely perfect for a fair comparison, but the peak level's the same and the integrated LUFS is the same. So let's go ahead and listen to the version with nothing on first. So I definitely love the sound of this one more than I prefer the one without anything on it. Again, we have to keep in mind some compression was done to the drum track, and then there was some EQ put onto those synths. So that is making a difference, which we will be trying to match with our other processors that we bring on. For this example, we've used the Lindell 80s channel and also the bus. And this one is way faster to work with. And you also have the option, once you do have everything set up here, to randomize all of the channels in one click. Just like before, we have a compressor working on the drums. It's working pretty hard. And then on our instruments, we have applied the EQ. So one thing that I realized in using this EQ, even at pretty extreme settings compared to the one that was in Cream, is that I cannot get the same tone out of the bass synthesizers at all. No matter how hard I try to jack that up, it just doesn't have that same kind of warmth and like tubiness that the other one has, for lack of a better term. But anyway, let's go ahead and we'll listen with all of this processing on and off. And again, this is on every single one of these channels here. So here we go. All right, so we'll go ahead, bounce this out, and then we'll compare it. And what I can tell you right now, before even listening to or making the comparison, is that this one is just so much easier to work with. It explains why this would be more of my go-to compared to the other one. We'll see what the tone is, and if I like the other one better, to be honest, I would still use this one because it's just so much quicker and efficient and more user-friendly. Tonally, these two sound really, really different. So this one's going to be way brighter. Now, I wonder if some of that has to do with mixing, because I did change some things over here. So this isn't like a like-for-like comparison, but we will hear the tonal differences for sure. Okay, so let's start with the 80s channel. And for lack of a better term, this one does have more of like an 80s sound, and this one has a little bit more of like a super hi-fi kind of sound. When I looked at the span, to be perfectly honest, it looked very similar, like the actual curves and the shapes, and maybe it's just my eye. Let's look at them together. So this is the 80s, and then this one on the left is the Cream, and I'll just mute them both and we'll just look at them. So we can see up here in the highs, there's not as steep, I don't think, of a roll-off, but otherwise it actually looks really similar. So you can tell that these preamps are having a significant difference along with the compressor and the EQ. So for our final example, we will go and we will use Black and then see how that compares and if it adds something. Okay, and so our final example, we are using Black on all of the channels. It is not on either of the groups. And also keep in mind that all we have is access to the mic preamps. So we don't have access to like line or other types of pre's. It's just all mics, and that will make a difference. So obviously the beauty of this plugin is that there's tons of different banks when you buy the full version, but let's hear how this sounds. I didn't do any gain staging adjustments. So however it came in was how hot it came in. I don't think anything was clipping, but we're probably adding a decent amount of weight and saturation. So let's go ahead and listen. I have added an EQ. which is actually getting a little closer to what we had with the cream. And then with the drums, I've added a compressor, just like we did previously. Okay, so now all together. And finally, what we'll do is we'll bounce it out and we'll compare it to our other loops and see what we think. All right, these have all now been LUFS matched according to that integrated scale, and we'll just flip back and forth between the nothing to the guru, and then maybe we'll do the nothing to the cream, and then the nothing to the 80s channel, and just have a few parting thoughts. A few final thoughts. I'm not going to do a shootout or tell you which I like the best or anything like that, because I don't find that to be super instructive. What's obvious is that we can hear major tonal changes on all of those. So it will come down to personal preference and or specific style as to what maybe fits the best. What I will tell you is that I think from Acustica Audio, this might be their kind of linchpin, because it is so much easier to work with that Black plugin compared to any of the other Acustica Audio things I've worked with before, because it's just so easy. So I could set it up at the same speed or about as fast as I could set up the 80s channel, still got a really interesting tone out of it. And I can't wait to see all of the various volumes that they add to it, because for somebody like me, I just love playing around with these finishers, and I consider this plugin to be a finisher. As we talked about before, you have to have a good track for this to matter. Like, this is not an amazing piece of music here, so it really doesn't matter. But as somebody who's super nerdy and just into the ear candy and into the subtleties, definitely a fan of it. I think all of these sounds, including the one with no processing, have merit. And I think that's where we'll leave it. So hopefully this has been somewhat instructive and maybe has encouraged you to go out and give it a try. And yeah, have a wonderful day. Take care.